Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Not Just Politics podcast. Today is Thursday, May 1st. I am in the studio here. Gavin is not here right now. He went home for a few weeks to State College, but he'll be back shortly. Today we have a very special guest in the studio. She is, among many other things, a journalist, author of I Never Thought of It That Way, How to Have Fearlessly Curious Conversations in Dangerously Divided Times, the Senior Fellow for Public Practice at Braver Angels, and the host and executive producer of A Braver Way, a show in collaboration with Braver Angels, Seattle's NPR affiliate station KUOW, and Deseret News, a show where you can disagree about politics without losing heart, where you can hear and be heard by people who confound you. She is your guide across the divide. Mónica Guzmán, welcome to the Not Just Politics podcast.
Hey, Carson. Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Thank you very much for being here. I'm very excited. For our listeners who don't know you, can you give us your background in how you started doing this work that you're doing?
It came through two paths. One was very personal. I'm in a politically divided family, like so many people across the country. I lean blue, my parents lean red. We're Mexican immigrants. And around the 2016 presidential campaign, our ability to talk to each other about politics and our political opinions, or even life itself, given how political everything seemed, was tested, as it was like so many others. And after that point, I was sensing the pressure to stick to my side and push my parents away. And somehow, even though they and I had really, really heated conversations, it was like we kept it to a simmer. I often say that friction in a conversation is good, like the friction between different points of view. Heat is good. The question is whether you're cooking something or burning something. And for the most part, we were cooking up understanding, moments of humility and connection, that miraculous common ground. And we managed not to burn very much at all, to the point where we're still talking about all of the things when it feels like a lot of people just aren't sure they can anymore. The other path that led me to this work is professional. I've been a journalist my whole career. I've always been so interested in people. I find them so fascinating, and the way people construct their world and their perspectives is just endlessly mysterious and interesting to me. And what I noticed in journalism was I'm in journalism to try to help people understand each other, because that's the role I think the institution plays in a democratic republic. But media has gotten so siloed, so splintered. Trust is so broken at the foundation underneath it, and underneath all the stories we tell each other about each other, that it felt like if I still want to try to help people understand each other, I need to step out of journalism and look at that broken thing underneath. And that led to this book kind of pouring out of me at a certain point. And all of this remaining an obsession. How can we see each other and hear each other across political divides?
And this is a question that you said that you like to ask people in the book. Why you? Why did you?
Me?
Yeah. Why did you decide to do this and not somebody else?
Yeah, and I love that question because there's many reasons I love that question. But one of them is because I don't know that the person themselves is the only person who can really give the answer. We can just kind of take a stab at it, but that fascination with people runs pretty deep. My husband and I were talking about this the other day, like, what are our hobbies? And he said, I think our main hobby is people. And I said, yeah, you're right. Our hobby is people. I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were giving me, more like TV shows I should watch and stuff. And it's like, I don't have time for TV shows. There's too many conversations to have. Like, I don't even know. So I love conversation. I find it such an adventure. And I love getting lost in it. And I think it's so sophisticated and interesting. And I think just over the course of my life, even though I started out really shy, there's some fun stories about that, like eventually conversation became I don't know, just too tempting and too fun. And it at some point it just stopped mattering that much to me if I made a fool of myself or, I don't know, ended up questioning some deep down thing. So that's one thing is I've just really enjoyed disappearing into other people's stories and having my story sort of merge with theirs and then like see what comes up. So maybe that. I also remember I almost wrote this in the book actually when I was in school and all the girls started doing that thing in like middle school where during lunch you would all go to the bathroom together, you know? Like
Right.
we're all
Yeah.
going to get up and go to the bathroom together. And I'd be like, "No." And they'd be like, "Come on, Monica, I'll go to the bathroom." I'm like, "That's why I'm not going."
Right.
So I feel like I've had this allergy to conformity. And so to the extent that there's been a kind of political tribalism, if that's pointed out to me, I want to get away from it. Like I always want to know, what do I actually think? And if there's the possibility that I think something that I actually only think in order to belong to a group, then I want to know what I really think. And I find that like compelling. And I think that's compelling for a lot of people. I think we all want to know who we really are, and we want to make sure that there's a separation, right, between us and others, where we actually know who we really are. So I think that's motivated me as well. And then also, I mean, I think this is true of a lot of families, but I absolutely adore my family, and it was really, really weird and hard after the 2016 election to hear so many of my friends, with views that I shared, by the way, calling people who voted for Trump all kinds of names and saying things about them that I'm like, yeah, that's not right. I know that's not right. I know why it's important to say that, and I know why it feels good, but we've got to do this differently. Vilifying other people isn't true and isn't right, and it just kind of burrowed into my heart and wouldn't leave. And so, yeah, it started as this personal thing, but it was more just like, we're not seeing the truth. We're not seeing the truth because we're really motivated to stay in our groups.
Yeah, I think that's something important that you said. Like, people want to find out who they are. I think that that social media and the internet have flattened a lot of our personalities. They've flattened a lot of people, and I think it's tough in a way to like figure out who you are whenever there's so much noise and whenever everything is. We've all been kind of like corralled into this like way of behaving and way of interacting with each other on social media that's never really struck me as human.
Yeah, no kidding. It's not. Another thing I like to think a lot as a reminder is that the internet is a non-place that makes us into non-people.
That's in my
Right.
phone. That quote's in my phone. From
Is
the
it
book.
really?
Yes. It is. I was like, that's
There
so
you go.
perfect. It's like what Dave Chappelle says, like Twitter's not a real place.
It's not.
It's
not.
not.
And it takes us away from ourselves, and we start to billboard things about ourselves as a way of kind of putting up shields or sending out beacons. But the one thing that the internet just doesn't show is kind of that full holistic kind of sense of humanity, that every one of us is more than our opinion on something or our opinions on many things. And our opinions come from our experiences. They're not just something we like put on in the morning and then can, change just because somebody dropped a meme that was really clever to them. That's not how it works. And yet on social media, it appears that way, that the cleverest meme should win the day. And if people aren't converted by it, then they're clearly crazy or dumb or something. And it's just, the ethic is just not real. It's just not human. But, the more time we spend on those channels trying to have these conversations, but without seeing the people behind the opinions and having the opportunity to get close to them and learn more about them and their stories, it's very difficult to relate, which makes it impossible to debate. Do you like that rhyme? I like when things
Yes,
rhyme.
I did like that rhyme.
Yeah, I like it too.
Do you want to? Because obviously, you traveled to the West Bank. That's,
I did.
I guess, I think where I want to start because I'm just very curious about that. So you said you spent the 10 days there,
Yeah.
and what? This seems like a silly question, but what sparked that? What specifically made
Yeah.
you want to go? I guess aside from the obvious.
Yeah. What made me want to go is a sense that there's something about issues that have everyone's attention and convey a lot of emotion. People are very passionate, but so few people have experience, have been there. It just made me want to be there. Like the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has just held our collective imagination and possibility and hopes and fears about how much work it can take to work for peace in times of war. And it's just tested everything we know about conflict. And when, after October 7th, when that issue became so explosive in America, I just started to feel like, first of all, I don't want to have a strong opinion because I don't feel informed enough.
Yep.
It seems so complicated and there's so many layers. And I've seen what it is to have strong opinions with very little information, and I don't want to be reckless. And then again, I hear about it. I hear about it and about it and about it through layers of sort of reports from others and things like that. But what does it mean to actually be there? And what does it mean to cut through the layers through which all this information flows to us here in the United States? What does that mean? So that curiosity had gotten pretty big for me, especially after an episode on my podcast, A Braver Way, where me and my co-host April Lawson had talked about that. Mm-hmm. And then a very good friend of mine who is a traveling Quaker minister and was going to be going to the West Bank with a group of Quakers from the United States and from the UK said, you know what? We got room. We got room in our visit for you if you want to come. And what they were doing was visiting a school that is a Quaker school in Ramallah in the West Bank, which is considered the capital of the West Bank. And it was a pastoral care visit. So it was a trip to listen to folks and take care of them and be with them and kind of accompany them through what they're going through. And it was really big. It's hard to sum up. And it's left me with a lot of things. This only happened earlier this month, just a couple weeks ago. It's left me with a lot of things to process, and it feels like I encountered some of the biggest challenges to bridge building work, and also the bleakest cautionary tales about where we in the United States could all find ourselves if we don't figure this out.
Were you guys ever in any in the way of any physical harm while you were there?
There was one day where Palestinians had set up a general strike. And that meant that all the shops were closed, the school that we were staying at closed, everything was closed, and it was on a Monday. And we were walking to visit someone in Ramallah. And as we walked back, our kind of the leaders of the trip said, whoa, 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 and kind of stopped us for a bit because they saw armed people up ahead. What's going on? We knew that there was going to be a rally, like a protest. And so what they were checking was, who is it? Is it Palestinian police? Is it Israeli soldiers? And when they saw that it was Palestinian police, there was a little bit of relief. Okay, we're okay. If it had been Israeli soldiers in Ramallah, which is area A of the West Bank, it usually means, something maybe rough here. Stay away. So that was one moment that I remember. Another was we went to Jerusalem, East Jerusalem, on Palm Sunday, which was incredible, and we were part of the Palm Sunday procession. And at the end of it, as we were getting ready to head out, we heard the sirens. And the sirens are just what you hear when missiles are incoming in this part of the world. And I had to kind of be like, is that the wind? Or is it sirens? Because I remember there were these boys fixing a bike near us, and they were just kind of thwacking at something on the bike, and the sirens started, and their rhythm of thwacking didn't change. And I was like, wait, did they even notice that there's sirens? Like, this feels like a big deal. And then moments later, and we did confirm it was the sirens. We talked to folks, and they're like, oh yeah, those are the sirens. And then moments later, we heard like percussion in the sky, like someone playing drums in the sky. And that was the Iron Dome missile defense system just shooting those missiles out of the sky. The shrapnel can come down and still be dangerous. So in the news, we saw reports about that. But yeah, it was very interesting to be there. We learned that it was missiles that had been shot by Houthi rebels toward Jerusalem, and that's life. That's life there, and that was wild to me.
Yeah, I'm curious what you think about this. I think something I've always been bothered by when the left talks about privilege in this country is that American privilege is never really talked about, and how that's something that we'll never have to really worry about. Like, we don't have to worry about tanks rolling through the street or missiles flying overhead. So to me, I almost can't imagine what that's like. Like, seeing, I've seen the Gaza Strip on my phone, and it's awful to see, but I can't imagine actually seeing it.
Yeah. And to be clear, the West Bank is nothing like the Gaza Strip. The war is, there's conflict, there's violence, there's definitely, skirmishes in the West Bank. It is not a safe place, but it's nothing like Gaza. At the school, we met a woman who had lost 19 members of her family in Gaza, and another woman who has her 4 boys in Gaza, and they can't come to her and she can't go to them. And that's just reality. And she just comes to school and works every day. And that's what she does. So I talked to Palestinians in the West Bank who feel this enormous guilt, right? Because as they see it, like, they're very brethren, obviously, with folks in Gaza. And it feels like there's nothing they can do for them. And, here they are still in a pretty tough spot, but nothing like over there. So it was really something to be in a place where the entire society is trying to live their lives and trying to live somewhat normal lives, but there's a war right there. I mean, this is a small piece of land we're talking about, and it was very surreal. It was very surreal, and just like you say, I think in America, it's easy to forget. It's easy to forget how much we have. Yeah. That keeps us not only safe, like, let's not even use the word safe, but sort of secure enough to be able to have robust conversations and debates that feel like they can actually attach themselves to some lever of influence.
Yeah.
Yeah. In Palestine, it's sort of like there's a lot you can't influence at all. It's all kind of beyond you, and there's a lot of corruption, and it's a very different thing. So I certainly came home feeling more grateful than ever for the freedoms we have here, and that we need to be very vigilant about. But gratitude plays a role in understanding what's valuable.
Mm-hmm. Did you have, well, okay, again, this seems kind of like a silly question to ask, but how many, like, I never thought of it that way, moments did you have?
Oh my God.
When you were there?
So many.
Yeah.
So it was like explosive. Yeah. It was so much.
Yeah.
We met with the mayor of Ramallah. Okay. And one of the things he said that's going to stick with me, from his perspective, from basically all Palestinians' perspectives, they are being oppressed and have been under occupation, and it's very, very real and visceral. And he was talking about the need to, fight for their liberation, their freedom, their rights, and do whatever it takes, he said, but not by whatever means necessary. And I thought that was such an interesting distinction. Do whatever it takes, but not by whatever means necessary. And what I heard in that...
Yeah, wow.
What I heard in that was there's a line around justice between what is justified and what is not. And, violence is always a possibility and a reality in that part of the world. I thought that was extraordinary. We met also with a Father Fadi, a religious leader who's Palestinian, and he had said that you've got to convert hope from something you wait for to something you do. And that was an I never thought of it that way moment for me as well, because it tracked with some of the powerlessness and some of the hopelessness that I heard in folks, where it is this sense of sort of waiting for someone else, waiting for something else to come. Because of course for them, they're focused on their own kind of day-to-day survival, and the issues that they talk about all the time are not like politics. It's, oh my gosh, like, how do we raise our kid, when they go to school and they hear about the war and there's all these things, like, what do we do? It's much more close to home. But yeah, changing hope from something you wait for to something you do really, really stuck with me.
I don't know if I would be strong enough of a person to say that you have to do whatever is necessary, but not by any means.
Right.
Like, that's
whatever
a really,
it takes, but
yeah, that's
Isn't it?
Yeah.
I thought it was a beautiful distinction, and if I could follow up with him and just kind of get into the granularity of it. But I think that's one of the challenges, that any discussion of justice, any discussion of conflict that gets to that, breaking point, has to wrestle with that. How far are you willing to go, and how far is too far? And what are the tools actually at your disposal? We also met this incredible person named Daoud, who runs a family farm called Tent of Nations. And Nick Kristof of the New York Times actually wrote a column about him the same week we were there. And he's doing a kind of nonviolent resistance that is fascinating. Like, he's got his family's had this farm for decades and decades, and they have the receipts, and they've been in a back and forth with the Israeli Supreme Court for many, many years about being able to keep, what they say, and they have the receipts is their land. Obviously, land is a huge, huge issue here, and it's very, very complicated. But yeah, he talks about for him, it's really, really important not to see each other as enemies. It's really, really important not to hate, to resist that at every turn. And he just showed a model that just had a lot of courage to me. And he's not beloved by all Palestinians at all.
That's
a lot of
even harder to
Palestinians
do.
disagree. Yeah, they disagree with each other about what the right response is. And oh my gosh, it was wacky. And then of course I came home, and I've been talking to a lot of people, including a lot of my friends who are Jewish, who are Israeli. And yeah, it's so big. It's such a big thing to unpack. And mostly what I'm interested in is just learning what it has to show me, even for the little bits that I can see. Yeah.
Just for the simple fact that we're on a timer here, is there anything else about this that you would like to talk about before we? It feels criminal to only talk about this for that short of an amount of time. However, other things I want to get to. Is there anything else about this we should discuss before we move on?
Oh boy.
Yeah, so I know that's also a tough one to just like.
I know it's a tough question. I think it's an ongoing conversation.
Did you do any reporting? Did you do any actual journalism while you were there, or any documentation?
There wasn't any deliverable that I was planning on having, but I journaled a lot. Journaled a lot, and sometimes it was difficult to do, and sometimes it took days for me to figure out what to say to myself about what we were even experiencing, the pain I was seeing, how bridge building even relates or does not relate to where folks are. And I had been, by the way, and maybe this is something to get into too, I had been given that warning ahead of time, that just kind of keep in mind, Monica, that you are a bridge builder, but that many of the folks you meet are just not in a place where they're going to be talking about that, the way that they do at Braver Angels, or the way they do in the United States when it comes to the tariffs or whatever. That's, and it was also really extraordinary to just be in a place where it's an entire society, not just one group, versus another, but the entire society is all kind of on agreement on one side of a very big divisive issue, Muslim or Christian, young or old, it doesn't matter. And so what that constrains in a conversation, and then how much yeah, how much it's really about taking care of each other. You know, I think a part of me thought there would be more political discussions, but no, it's just taking care of each other. And it feels so far from being able to talk about the kinds of things that could, it almost feels naive, that could heal a rift that big. It's so difficult to sum up.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay. I will, as I always do on the show, I'll do a hard pivot, like an ADHD coded pivot, as one of my friends calls it, to now, because being as I just graduated with a degree in media, as you did, so we are both creators of media and consumers of media, which I think is, it's obviously not something that everyone out there has a perspective like that. So there's a couple things that I wanted to talk about. First of all, I guess we will kind of stay on the same topic, but what is our media getting right about that situation in the West Bank and in Gaza, and what are we getting wrong?
Oh, interesting. I don't know that I'm qualified to answer very
Okay.
well, but I'll give just kind of general principles that come up for me as you
Okay.
ask that question. Our media is highly siloed, given the economics of online news. It's just for years and years and years. Many media have kind of learned the very practical lesson that you have to find a loyal audience in order to survive.
Yep.
And that's happened. Which isn't to say that there aren't outlets that work really hard to try to get many sides, many angles, and that's certainly true. But then those outlets are kind of undone by this general distrust, that
Yeah.
that kind of impacts all of our media. But I do have a lot of questions about the kinds of stories that are able to kind of be transmitted from that part of the world to here. We walked by the building where Al Jazeera used to be in Ramallah, and it was shut down, right? Like, journalists have been kind of run out of some places here, and that's very concerning. That tends to not, cross your fingers, be a thing that we have to worry about here. But whether people can securely even tell the stories that are happening is a big thing. I also think about the difference between the commentary and the interpretation and the agitation type of media versus the media that's just telling you what's going on. And it seems to me that that's out of balance. I don't tend to see, and again, I'm no expert on what the actual totality of our media about this issue is, but I don't get the impression that, we get enough media that is just telling us what's going on, just giving us the paths and perspectives that kind of animate that whole extraordinary, complicated issue. Whether from Israelis, from Jews, from Palestinians, from Arabs, from Muslims, from Christians. It took being there to even get the seeds of so much that I've never gotten just being kind of a, passive consumer of whatever media tends to come my way.
Sure.
There was so much that it didn't even feel that I was getting prepared for by the media that has made its way over here.
Yeah, it's tough. It seems like most of the news that we get in this country is filtered through an editorial lens.
Always.
Almost just before it even, like, that's the baseline of what we're getting. So it seems like it would be almost impossible to figure out exactly what's going on. Same thing with Ukraine, same thing with anything.
Yeah.
It just seems really tough.
To be fair, though, of course, there is a difference, right, between, in the United States, the universe of issues around the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the wars and all of that is broader. It's about college campuses. It's about anti-Semitism. It's about protest and free speech. It's about divisions within the Jewish community. It's about generational divides. It's about Zionism. It's about how we talk about the world and people and how to take care of each other. from the United States lens, it's that, plus all the foreign policy, national security, who are our allies, what is our posture toward conflicts in other parts of the world, what is our national interest. I mean, it's a completely different set of questions than if you're Palestinian or if you're Jewish and Israeli living in that part of the world. So that all makes sense, and we certainly just have a different lens, and I think it's actually important to keep that in mind too. But it will, yeah. I guess another thing that's worth saying is while I was there, I was very conscious of the fact that it seemed like for a lot of the Palestinians we met, we Americans held a lot of power. Even though I'm not an elected official, the fact that I was there, yeah, they look at the states as being, I don't know, like the stories that the United States is telling itself about that part of the world seem to be quite consequential for them. And so, again, talking about kind of American privilege, it exists.
Okay, now this is really the topic switch. I've been listening to a bunch of A Braver Way. You did an episode about changing people's minds, and the topic of discussion in that episode was that there need to sort of be like certain conditions put in place for someone to want to change their mind. And that reminded me of something that was in David Blankenhorn's book, where he says there are two frameworks of American political English. There's like a red framework and a blue framework. And the red framework is, I think I have it written down correctly, I am who I am. I don't care what other people think. And the blue framework is I am who I am, insensitivity to others. And that the unfortunate byproduct of the red framework comes off as, I guess, anger. And the byproduct of the blue framework is that it comes off as being kind of condescending sometimes.
Yeah.
So with that being said, how do we get people with that in mind and with just the whole situation we're in? Like, how do we get people to a place, like what if somebody's not curious at all? How do we get them there to the point where they would want to change their mind rather than just viewing that as being something to run away from?
Yeah. Ooh. Well, I think David McRaney, who is the author of the book How Minds Change, who I interviewed on that A Braver Way episode,
Yep.
his book, How Minds Change, is such a good summary of the latest research on the science of persuasion. And one of the deepest takeaways for me was how important it is to keep in mind that when our opinions form a part of our identity, it's not just reason that's going to talk us out of something we believe. If belonging is important, then one of the things you can try to do if you're interested in at least making a context where somebody is open to shifting how they think about something is to give them a different home, is to give them a sense that if you change your mind on this, you can find a home for that too. You can find belonging in that idea too. I remember some time ago talking with a friend who had a really difficult political conversation with her father. And one of the things she noticed from that conversation was that she had told her dad, she had heard her dad say a bunch of things about his politics. And she had responded by saying, see, Dad, you're progressive. You say you're conservative, but that thing you just said, that's progressive. And she was surprised that her dad fought that. She was like, it's logical. Like, he said this, and that seems really progressive to me. But if you're pushing back on someone's self-identification, it's an attack.
Yep.
It's an attack. We so often jump to labels, and then we want to kind of put people onto our terms rather than their own. So that's another thing. You're not going to help people find a home in a different idea by attacking how they think of themselves. So that's super, super important. And I think it's just a really, really strong point from David McRaney. As he sums up from some of the research, a lot of psychology tells us that for the human mind and heart, the fear of social death
Yeah.
is greater than the fear of physical death, right?
Yeah.
So we have so much keeping us from wanting to change our minds on the things that feel like they're very much a part of us. So those are the places that increasingly our political differences have rooted themselves in. So anytime that we feel compelled or we feel a rush to want to attack somebody else for what they believe, shame them, tell them they're wrong, even if they're wrong, that's not going to be productive. Even if they are wrong, that's not going to be productive. And the last thing I'll mention is it's almost impossible, as you said, David Blankenhorn laid out the blue, ethos. It sounds condescending. We can come into these exchanges thinking we're so right.
Yeah.
And we're just here to educate the other person. So even the idea that I'm here to change your mind is condescending. Especially if I don't even understand your mind to begin with. I'm going to change it, but I don't even know it. So if someone's coming at me like that, I'm going to feel unheard, disrespected, and I'm just going to put my guard up. I'm not going to want to explore perspectives with this other person. This person wants to change me. How does that respect me? How does that see me? So the paradox of persuasion is, don't try to persuade, and you're much more likely to persuade.
Yeah, I wonder if that's because way back, like, social death did often mean physical death.
Ooh, say more.
Because you got kicked out of the tribe. And if you weren't in the safety of the group, then there was physical danger. And I feel like that's the tough part, is like a lot of what we're dealing with, and this is kind of obvious, but a lot of what we're dealing with is just like software that we have that just hasn't updated yet. That's one thing like Tim Urban talks about in his book is what did he say? He said, in only a couple thousand years, we went from hunter-gathering to society, and that's not enough time for evolution to take a shit.
Yeah. I love that.
So we haven't updated anything, and we're still rocking this like old-timey software that makes us tribal and it makes us groupish, and we don't have to be like that anymore. But we haven't figured it out.
We haven't, and we're spending a lot of time in technologies that, again, take us away from sort of our embodied selves. Like when you're actually in the room with someone you disagree with, there's a lot working against what you might do online of just lashing out and saying a bunch of crap. Like, you can't do that when the person's right there with you. And we have that programming too. We're not putting ourselves in spaces where we can even employ it, because we're doing it in spaces that strip away all those wonderful tools we have, including like you and I are embodied to a certain degree because we have gestures, we have real-time voice. We're not doing this asynchronously through text and emojis, right? Yes. And every now and then, like I'm seeing you smile and you're seeing me smile, and whatever we're saying, the tone is coming across a lot more clearly. I've found it, to be very true. I think everyone can relate that when you're texting with someone and you're a little mad at them or you're suspicious of them in that moment, whatever they text to you, you're going to read in the voice of your suspicion. Yeah. You're going to read meanness into what they're saying that they did not intend at all. You're going to start to project what you imagine onto that voice. So, we're not even using the tools we have. And then the tools we have haven't really evolved, maybe to catch up. But I have a lot of faith in us. I think that we adapt quickly. And I think that's what we're doing now. We're rushing to catch up.
Yeah, it does feel like a big game of catch up. So you've been doing a bit of a deep dive on free speech, as something you'd mentioned. There's a quote from your book. I think it's my favorite quote from the book. And you said, coming from the world of journalism, I feel like I'm supposed to be rah-rah for information as the cure for everything, but I'm not. I'm tired of us throwing out links and throwing up our hands, ranting to our people who get it while raging at those other people who don't. I'm done too with the idea that if we could just rid the world of misinformation, everything would be fine, as if cutting down weeds would prevent new ones from sprouting. False stories soar because good people relate to something in them that's true. And I think that's my favorite quote from the whole book. I'm curious, we've put ourselves in a time whenever we have more information than we've ever had. So it almost feels like, to me, we've done a little bit of a case study in what happens when you give people access to all of the information, and it somehow seems to have left us worse off in many ways than when we didn't have that information. Like whenever I look back at the history of the media landscape back when there were only 3 broadcast networks and everybody watched the same 4 programs every night, that had plenty of flaws to it, but like that at least gave us a sense of social cohesion that it just feels like we don't have anymore. Yeah. And yet we've been given all of the information. So I guess my question is, do you think that the marketplace of ideas works as it's supposed to?
Yeah, I mean, I would zoom in on the word works. What does that mean?
Yeah, that's
What's
a good
the metric
question.
of success? And we don't know.
Well, I guess metric of success would be that the truth prevails and that the best idea wins, right?
Right. If that's the metric of success, then it's really messy because I'm not ready to say, gosh, all this information just buried us in a deeper hole. So let's have less information. Also, let's constrain what people are allowed to say. Let's censor
right.
here and there. And
right.
It's like, no, I don't think it's the answer at all.
I don't think so
would,
either.
As the mother of 2 kids, one of whom is in middle school, I think of this more as there's a kind of adolescence happening. We made this extraordinary technological advance where more voices were unleashed. And given our liberal ideals, at least in this part of the world, around letting folks say what's really on their minds and hearts, that's it. The floodgates have opened. They're saying what's on their minds and hearts. The First Amendment protects lies. Yep. It protects a lot of speech that people would call hate speech, but that should be a pretty high bar. There's all kinds of things that it protects that is really annoying to a lot of people, right? Depending on who you are. So basically, we've just opened the floodgates. And I think, yes, if the metric is our ability to find truth together, it sure feels like we've taken some steps back. Because now we're drowning in each other's concerns, but all we can see them as is lies and malevolence and idiocy. And I think the journey here is to see them as people's concerns, see the emotion, see the anger, see the passion with which people express ideas and what they want to express for whatever reasons they want to express it. We're going to have to up our wisdom level. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I think so often we read so much ill intent on those things, and it makes us all the more scared. And when we're scared, we don't want to talk to those people who made us scared. We feel unsafe. And so we're in this vicious cycle I talk about where we're judging each other more while we're engaging each other less.
Yeah.
And if you just repeat that cycle, judge more, engage less, judge more, engage less, well, what are your judgments based on?
Mm-hmm.
They're not based on information, primary source information on the other person. So yes, we're drowning in information, but what kind? Because the research also shows us that while we may be able to, I don't know, if in the case of liberals, maybe you do really well in the New York Times weekly news quiz, but we're failing our knowledge of other people's perspectives when they disagree with us. And I think what we're learning is that matters too. That matters a lot. Maybe that matters more. And reading a lot of news is not going to get us that wisdom about other people's perspectives. The only thing that's going to get us that wisdom is talking to each other. Mm-hmm. Not through mediators, but actually talking to each other, for crying out loud. So that's the place where, yes, lots of information. Oh my gosh, drowning in it. But we're doing a lot less. Like all the stats show we have fewer friends. People say they have fewer close friends. We have fewer in-person interactions, compared to digital. Like, there's even more people just, staying home from work, myself included. I haven't been to an office in ages. So fewer collisions with just real flesh and blood human beings has also been a consequence of our information age. So we need to look at that, because if we are more informed about people and how people work and how we work, I think we can develop the wisdom to get out of this adolescent phase, right? Adolescent phase trying to adapt to this technology and what it means for our expression and what it means for our communication, what it means for our democratic republic and how that should be organized. So I'm still over here going we got this. This is messy and ugly. It might get even uglier before it gets better. But on the other side of this, wow, we're going to know a lot more about ourselves than Walter Cronkite ever could have imagined.
Good point. Yeah. In your conversation with Isaac Saul, he raised a lot of interesting points. I'm not sure that I agreed with all of them. The one that I think I did agree with was this is something I talked about all the time whenever I was in class. The biggest problem I think I had with the atmosphere that I was in, it was obviously a very progressive space, being in journalism classes and, courses about mass media and stuff like that. There was very little introspection into what the actual responsibilities of media practitioners are. And I thought that there was very little asking of the question, like, why don't people trust us? And I've always thought that it's the burden of responsibility to earn the trust of the American people is always on us. It's not on them. But he made a couple of good points that, media consumers also have some responsibility that, the example he gave was like, if I give you a story that Congress passed a bill that would save Americans, 90% of Americans, like $1,000 a month on healthcare, next to a story that Donald Trump had an affair with a porn star, which one are you going to click on? And that most people usually click on the other one. And he made the argument that by doing that, you signal to the news source that this is what you want to see, so the news sources will make more of that. But I don't know, and I'm curious your thoughts on this. I don't know if I agree with that, because I don't think that the point of a news source is to give people what they want. I think it's to give what they need to see.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There's obviously a responsibility on news consumers, but I'm not sure, and that is a part of it, but I'm not sure if I agree that it's as strong as he was saying it is. Do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I remember also kind of pausing as he was saying that. So thank you for pulling this up, because I also kind of paused. And in large part for the reason you say is it's true that economic incentives definitely make it easier to remain a financially sustainable media business if you are giving people what they want, and you're looking at the metrics and you're seeing what views they need affirmed and, what headline is going to really, outrage them or make them feel a certain way. And all of that clearly works. And it's true that is the easiest model right now, which stinks. But I think it's also true that people know what they need. I think actually one of the biggest things that journalists as a whole, I'm generalizing hugely, but one of the biggest things that journalists as a profession has lost is trust in people. The question we're obsessed with is trust in journalists. But how can we expect people to trust journalists when journalists don't trust people? So
that's a good point.
You know what I mean? Like we haven't done a good analysis of what and I'm including myself in journalists' what our drop and what the little faith that we seem to have in people. Sometimes I think, like, more than ever we think of people as manipulative cattle, and we just can't let them have too much reach to all the ideas. And on Facebook they'll see some view about COVID or some view about the election, and it'll all go south, and we can't let that happen. And so we have to just, let's talk to, and it's like, no, this is part of the problem. And again, going back to the adolescence, I'm not saying that there hasn't been. We're drowning in a flood that does seem to have set us back in the collective search for truth. I agree. I think that's true, but I don't think the solution is to say, people just don't have what it takes, but we do.
Yes,
So
I've been saying
I just don't think that's it.
Like
I just don't think that's it.
The language that we use doesn't give anybody any agency to think for themselves. It's like, oh, well, they'll just slip into it if we let them. They'll just slip in. And it doesn't, and I think there's a lot of that. I think there's a lot of similar conversations about, like, algorithms now on social media. Like, we just kind of, the one thing I'm worried about now is that, I don't know if you've noticed this, but the algorithm will people are starting to censor certain words because the algorithm won't boost the content if those words are actually said. So a word like COVID gets censored. A word like racist. I saw the one time I saw the word black got censored because it gets the algorithm perceived that it was like a race thing. And I'm worried that it's going to change the way that we communicate with each other, because if we're going digital and all the content we make is like we have to censor certain words, then it brings back stigma. It takes away our agency in these conversations. And I just don't want that to happen, but I don't see anything out there trying to stop it.
Agreed. And that's another reason why we should all consider upping the ratio of our in-person engagements, because no algorithm's going to bleep out a word I say to you when
Yes.
we're in the same room. So thank God for that. But it's like the technology and the fact that it's all been centralized in these platforms, and that now there's political games being played with like where harm is coming from and who has the political power to define that for everybody else, means there's censorship at scale happening all the time. And we used to talk about that as just coming from China and Russia.
Nope.
Hey, guess what? Like, it's actually been happening here for a long time, which, by the way, is one of the things that, being a liberal, this is something I always think about, is like, what am I learning from conservatives? Like, what did I miss that they've been saying? And one of the things they've been saying is, yo, like, there's actually been severe restrictions on expression for years, often geared toward conservatives who had the wrong ideas about the origin of COVID or the wrong ideas about the vaccines and things like that. But man, and I know that it all came from a good place, the folks in power, like I get it. But we can't be doing this to each other. There's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way.
Okay, the time went by much quicker than I thought. I have a couple of wrap-up questions for you here. Could we kind of do this as like a rapid-fire thing? I don't know if any of these are like suited for rapid-fire.
I will do my very best.
Okay,
I will.
okay.
And then,
Okay.
laugh at me if it doesn't work, and I'll try.
What does it mean to be an American to you?
Oh, jeez.
That's the one that I was like, I'm not sure if this works, but I'll try anyway.
All right, give me a moment, because now I have
Okay.
to think in order to say things short enough.
Should
Carson.
we,
Like, this is the dilemma.
should we go to another one?
What does it mean to be an American to me?
Yeah.
I think it means that we have to have the courage to engage with difference. That is the thing that we were founded on. Mm-hmm. That's it.
Okay.
We got to do it.
What is something you're afraid that people will get wrong about you?
That people think I'm just defending conservatives.
Yeah.
People on the left, on my side, will think I'm just defending conservatives. That's not what I'm here to do.
What is something that's underrated in today's society? Could be anything. Anything underrated.
Avatar: The Last Airbender? No.
Ooh, okay.
No, that's not even true. It's like if you were in the know, it's so like rated exactly where it needs to be. That's a TV show for anyone who doesn't know.
I was going to say the
Something
TV show or
that's-
the movie.
No, you know what? You know what's underrated in today's society is the skill of managing fear. How's that?
Ooh, that's really good.
You like
That's
that?
really
I think
good.
that's juicy.
Yeah,
I think that's
like
juicy.
that.
Cool.
Do you ever feel like you don't want the pressure of being in your position?
I mean, sometimes. I think we all have those moments where we're like, you know what? It'd be really nice to just not have hard work to do. So to that extent, yes. But overall, no. I love this.
And what's your favorite part of your job? And you have 1,000, so you could go through each of them individually or just one thing in general.
I get to have amazing conversations all the time.
Yep. It's like
so
a drug.
fun.
Yeah.
Yes.
It is. What gives you hope for the future? And what gives you, and I think we kind of talked about it, but anything else you want to add to this? Like, what gives you hope for the future, and what gives you hope that that America can get over this polarization problem that we have?
We're talking about the right things. And so the next step is to do the things we're talking about doing.
What was something you thought I was going to ask you, but I didn't?
Well, you did the why you question, so that's always fun.
Yes.
I don't know. I thought maybe you might ask about the current moment, the administration. That certainly seems to be the talk of the town.
Yeah. I
But
didn't really. I thought that was. I thought that would be kind of boring for a conversation with
Right.
you. Yeah.
I don't have particularly profound things to say. There's so much commentary out there already, and I would, just let's work on what we do.
Okay. I like that, and I agree. Well, thank you, Monica. Thank you very much for taking time out of your day to sit down with me. I really appreciate it. The book is I Never Thought of It That Way. It will be available for purchase at Monica's website or on Amazon in the link in the description. Is there anything that you would like to shout out before we wrap up here? Anything you got going on you want to let people know about?
Oh my gosh. I've been quiet on social media, but
Yeah.
things are coming. I'm kind of baking. I'm baking things.
Okay.
So they're still in the oven.
Okay.
I don't know. Stay tuned. Stay
And-
curious and stay tuned. How about that?
Okay.
We'll sign off.
And this is, and I forgot to ask this. This is the last question. and this does feel kind of selfish because you
Okay.
do so much already, but is there any plan for another book?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Are you worried about having to top this?
Yes.
Yeah,
No, I'm trying. No. I'm trying to be super zen and be like, girl, if no one buys it, it's fine. You gotta write what you gotta pour out again, and whatever happens, happens.
Right. Okay, I mean, I would be terrified, but I'm glad that you're not. I'm glad that you're not.
No, I am. I'm just trying to pretend.
And thank you very much for where is it? Thank you very much for signing this for me.
Yeah, you
That's
bet.
super
Was that at the
cool.
convention?
Yeah, that was in
Was that at the
Kenosha.
convention?
Yes, that was in
Awesome.
Kenosha. So that was
That's
super
so
fun.
cool. Yay.
Well, thank you, Monica. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'd love to do this again.
Let's do it. Okay. This was amazing. Thank you, Carson.
Of course. Bye, everybody. We'll see you later.